Kelsey. This is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing my fancy booktube hat. It has gotten to be the time of the year where like the sun sets before I get around to filming. The light is crappy and so I light candles and pretend I meant it to be this way. But anyhow, this is not to the point. This is my October TBR, including a couple of readathons that I am participating in. Now, you may remember, if you watched my September I Sat Rat TBR video thing, I'm sort of stressed right now about all of the books that I'm kind of trying to read all at once. This is still the case. I have a massive list of books that I feel like I have to get through by the end of October. Here on the last day of September, as I'm filming this, I am still reading like 3 of the books on my September TBR. I'm not going to repeat those, I'm just going to keep reading them. And I'm just going to show you like all the things I have stacked up for October, and I'm going to tell you which of them I think are going to fit the challenges for the Cozyathon and another reading event that I'm thinking of participating in. But as I was kind of talking about with the I Suck at Readathons TBR, like, I'm not picking books that weren't already on my October TBR for any readathons this month. It's just not happening. So part of why I have so many books kind of stacked up for October is because throughout the year up until this point, I've kind of been stashing books away for October. Like, this is a kind of spooky-ish October-ish thing. Oh, this is a kind of spooky-ish October-ish thing. I'll read this for Halloween. And this too. And this too. And then aside from that, I also had the idea a few months back that, ooh, what if for like October I read only fantasy books about witches and like read a lot of fantasy books about witches regardless of their spookiness. And also all of these spooky-ish books that I have stacked up, and it's just gotten way out of control. But, like, I don't know when else I'm going to read any of these books, so we'll see. Anyhow, like the I Suck at Readathons readathon, I think the Cozyathon is going to be relaxing in terms of calming me down about all the things I'm trying to read. Because that's another readathon that is not about reading a whole ton of things, it's about like reading in cozy ways. But first I'm going to show you all of the books that I have planned out for the month. The first couple here don't fit the theme of October-ish things because they are new things that I want to get reviews for posted. And these are the 2 books of the Waning Moon Duology by Leena Likitalo, 5 Daughters of the Moon, and The Sisters of the Crescent Empress. This one is an arc, so I want to review it in a timely manner, and this second book in the duology comes out on November 7th. So because I like to space out the books that I read in a series, I'm planning on reading 5 Daughters of the Moon early in the month, and The Sisters of the Crescent Empress a little later in the month. The other review book that I have to read and review in the month of October I think does fit the theme because I've heard that it's a little dark and creepy spooky, and that is Under the Pendulum Sun by Jeanette. This is a historical fantasy novel that has Victorian missionaries going to ferry. This is an early October release, so I want to try and read and review it sometime in like the first half of the month. I definitely want to have a review up for it by the end of the month. And then I currently have one library book out that I have been renewing several times now that I think sort of is probably going to fit the creepiness theme for October reading, just based on what I know about the author's writing, and this is A Face Like Glass by Frances Hardinge. This is a kind of older book of hers that I've wanted to read for a long time, but it's been out of print, and it came back into print this year with this new edition. This is, I think, about a city where people like don't have facial expressions unless they've been like specifically crafted. And it's about a girl who has normal facial expressions by our standards, but in this world that's terrifying. The next book I have here fits the theme of witches, but not of spooky things. And this is A Hatful of Sky by Terry Pratchett. This is the second book in the Tiffany Aching series. These are childhood favorites of mine that I've been trying to reread. I reread the first book, The We Free Men, almost a year ago now, and I loved it, and I haven't moved forward with my reread of the series yet, and it's way past time. The next book I have is like actually on my regular TBR to read soon, and it gets to go in the month of October because it does have like vampires and werewolves and supernatural things, and that's Soulless by Gail Carriger. I usually don't like vampires and werewolves and supernatural things, but this is also like fantasy of manners and comedic and steampunk, and I think that from what I've heard of Gail Carriger, I think her sensibility as an author is something that's going to really appeal to me. I've had this book forever, and it's like one of those things where I'm getting embarrassed that I haven't read it yet. Next is the first of two things I have by Ursula Vernon to read this month, and this is Dragonbreath, Curse of the Were-Weiner. This is the third book in the Dragonbreath series, which are kids' books. I am reading these to pass along to my cousin, who is a kid. And I need to read this so that I can send this to him maybe by Halloween? Anyhow, more than the first two in the series, this seems to have a spooky theme. After all, it's the curse of the Were-Weiner. Next, I have two Tor.com novellas that fit within the theme of witches. The first is Of Sorrow and Such by Angela Slater. This is going to be, I think, witches in the sense of magical women who are persecuted in communities. I expect this to be really hard-hitting, and I've been wanting to read this for a really long time. And then the next one may actually be a little more spooky or creepy, but it's definitely more in the urban fantasy type of thing, and that's Witches of Lychford by Paul Cornell. I've maybe heard that the second book in this series gets spookier than the first. I'll decide whether or not I'll be continuing on with the series after reading the first one, obviously, but I believe this is urban fantasy, and obviously, as the title indicates, there are witches. Next, I have a short story collection that I think is going to fit in the sort of Halloweenish, Octoberish mood, but because it's a short story collection, obviously I think some of the stories will fit better than others. And that's Pretty Monsters by Kelly Link, but that's just like from the cover, it looks like the perfect book to read in October. This is a short story collection that I think is geared more towards YA readers, and so I'm expecting it will be an accessible place to start with Kelly Link. I know that some people find her writing to be hard to get into. And then the last thing I have, which would like optimally be for me like the thing to read on Halloween night, I think is my second Ursula Vernon book, and that is Castle Hangnail, because look at it. This looks like a hilarious kind of Halloweenish middle grade about a girl named Molly who shows up to become the new witch of Castle Hangnail. So that was a lot of books there, and there are some other things that are floating around in my TBR radar that aren't even on that list. I have had for a while a library hold on Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire with the intent that that hold would come in sometime in October and I would read it. That holds list is moving way more slowly than I thought it would, because things are just like sitting in transit for a really long time and then sitting on hold shelves for a really long time, and like that list has not moved. And I don't imagine myself wanting to read this book any other time of the year, given how much creepier than I can normally handle the first book was, and how creepy this one promises to be. But I do want to read it because it's about the two characters from the first book that I liked the most. So I don't know what the fate of this is going to be. If it doesn't come in by the end of October, I might just wait until October next year to read it. So now I can calm down and talk about Cozyathon. Cozyathon is hosted by Sylvia Kay, and it's happening for the first 2 weeks of October. I will link the announcement video down below, and also there is a recommendations video that I am one of the booktubers who contributed recommendations for that collab video, so I'll link that as well. I recommended a couple of my favorite fantasy novels that I think of as cozy. So if you're interested to know what those are, please check that out. But there are 15 challenges for the readathon, and only a few of them are specifically book challenges, and I'll be looking to fill as many of those as possible with the books that are already on my TBR. First challenge is to read in a coffee shop. Second challenge is to read in a bathtub. Third challenge is to read an entire book by candlelight. So for that one, I will be picking one of these 3 shortest books from my TBR to read by candlelight. I also need to get some more candles, because the only scented candle I have right now is this one, and it's like a tropical scent, and it's nice, I like the smell, but it's not for fall. I have this one, which isn't scented, it's just, you know, nice high quality beeswax. And then I have tea lights, and that's it. So in terms of getting enough candles lit to actually read comfortably by candlelight and hopefully getting some nice fall scents going, I may be candle shopping. 4 is to read wearing fluffy socks and a jumper. I have fluffy socks, but they're at my parents' house. I don't know what I'm gonna do about that. I think a jumper in non-American English is something different than in American English. I think in British English it's like a sweater. I might just say screw the socks, I'm just gonna wear my enormous purple thing. I was wearing this in the recommendations video, but I'm not sure you could tell that it was like longer than like just top length. This is actually a full-length giant purple thing that my grandmother gave me. It is very cozy indeed. And it's a little bit silly, and that's part of why it's so cozy. Of course, whether or not any of this makes sense is going to hinge a bit on whether the weather gets chilly and stays chilly. It has been remarkably warm here until like today. It just started to get cool. If the temperature goes back up again, it's not gonna make sense to be doing like all these snuggly warm challenges in like 80-degree weather. But regardless, challenge 5 is to read while listening to relaxing music. 6 is to read while sipping a comforting hot beverage of your choice. For me, that is always tea. 7 is to read a chapter first thing in the morning. 8 is to read a book purely for escapism. And for me, I think the book that best fits this challenge from my TBR is going to be Soulless. 9 is to read a book with the word chocolate in the title, and this is where I have to restrain myself and just say that it's okay that I'm not going to meet this challenge, especially since, like, I could just put a library hold on The Dragon with the Chocolate Heart, which is a new middle grade release, but I'm not going to do that because I already have too many books on my TBR. 10 is to read a book with an autumnal cover. For this, I'm going to say Of Sorrow and Such is going to count because these are very autumnal colors. 11 is to reread an all-time favorite, and this one is going to be A Hatful of Sky. 12 is listen to an audiobook while baking. I will definitely be doing some baking. I'm not sure whether or not I will listen to an audiobook while doing it. If I can like get from the library an audiobook version of one of the things that I'm already reading and just listen to a small chunk of it on audio instead of in print, I might do that. I'm not wanting to add an audiobook to my TBR because they're very time consuming for me, because I actually have a really hard time double tasking while listening to audiobooks. I kind of have to put all of my focus on listening to the text. The one audiobook that I own that I haven't listened to is Landline by Rainbow Rowell, but again, I am resisting the urge to add any more things to this out of control October TBR. Number 13 is do exercise for at least half an hour while listening to an audiobook. Same thing, if I can get an audiobook version of something I'm already reading, I might do that. If not, I won't. Number 14 is treat yourself to a book you've been craving for a long time. Actually, any of these 3 that I've already mentioned, I could make an argument for why that would count, but another one that I could use for this would be A Face Like Glass, because I have been craving this book since before there was an in-print edition I could even get my hands on. And number 15 is to give a comforting book to someone who is going through a rough time. I am not really sure who in my life is going through a rough time right now. So I guess I have some like unobtrusive polite inquiries or like, hey, how are yous I need to make. I know that once I read this, I'll be able to mail it to my cousin. I don't know if he's having a particularly hard time. It's back to school and I never liked that. But anyhow, that's what's up with the Cozyathon. Can I read this many books in the first half of October along with all the other things I'm trying to finish? I don't know. The other reading event I noticed I could participate in with the books on my TBR is the October Empty Shelfie Spooky Shelfie edition. I normally don't pay attention to the monthly Empty Shelfie at all, even though I vaguely know it's a thing that exists. But for October, Roya from Unicorn Hunter Books is one of the co-hosts for the special Spooky Shelfie edition, so I noticed when she posted about it. There are 7 sort of spooky challenges, and I think I can actually hit most of them with the books on my list here. 1 is to read a book with a serial killer in it. 2 is to read a book that involves a spell or a curse. 3 is a book with supernatural or paranormal elements. 4 is a book with a freakish character. 5 is a book with a mask on the cover or in the title. 6 is a book with black and or orange on the cover, and 7 is to read a book with something that terrifies you in it. And this is a month-long reading challenge. So for a book that involves a spell or a curse, these are all fantasy books. Did I fail to mention that these are all fantasy books? Every single one of them. So I don't know exactly how many of them are going to contain things that are literally considered spells or curses. This one has curse in the title, Curse of the Were-Weiner, so I think I've got that. A book with supernatural or paranormal elements. Again, these are all fantasy. Some of them may be more on the supernatural paranormal side of the fantasy spectrum. I am pretty sure I could count Soulless. Interestingly, I think my non-spooky books may actually count for that too. I think these may have a sort of paranormal element. I think there's some sort of thing that eats souls in these. A book with a freakish character, I'm not really sure how to define that, but I am just going to say that this evil-looking hot dog is going to count because I'm pretty sure hot dogs aren't supposed to do that. For a book with a mask on the cover or in the title, obviously A Face Like Glass fits that perfectly. For a book with black and or orange on the cover, this one has both black and orange. This one has black. This one has orange. This one also has black. So I think I got that covered. And then the 2 challenges that would depend on Down Among the Sticks and Bones coming in from the library sometime this month would be read a book with a serial killer in it and read a book with something that terrifies you. That may have just been a spoiler for Every Hearted Doorway. Sorry about that. Of course, since I haven't read any of these books yet, it could turn out that some of them will meet those criteria. If they don't, and this book doesn't come in from the library, I'm just going to have to accept that 5 out of 7 challenges is going to have to be good enough for participation in the reading challenge. I am pretty sure that something here will end up having something in it that terrifies me, by the way, because I'm terrified by a lot of things. I just don't know what book that will end up being. I happen to know for a fact that the portal world that Down Among the Sticks and Bones takes place in terrified me when it was described in Every Hearted Doorway. So that's me kind of trying to read a lot of October-appropriate things without actually liking spooky, creepy books. I generally fail at seasonal reading really, really hard. This is the first time I've really tried to do it for, like, October and Halloween, and it's already turning into a mess. Let me know if you are trying for any of these readathons or, you know, any sort of themed Halloweenish October reading. Let me know if that ever is a thing that works for you. Anyhow, I hope you're having a nice day. That is all. Bye for now.